This is Craig.
Good evening, Craig.
Okay.
Good evening. It is Tuesday, April 6th, and our first night meeting being held this evening at the Franklin County Courthouse. I'd like to call the meeting to order, and if you'd all please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, the first item on the agenda is the presentation by Zach and Jim Potts, Zach Kennedy. Are you on the phone?
Yes, sir, we are. Well, I am.
Help yourself.
Oh, boy. Well, thank you for hosting the meeting. I think it's kind of fun to have an evening meeting here. The report this week is going to be a little shorter, not so sweet. We passed through the final cutoff which was bills to pass out of their fiscal committees in the opposite house, and that was last Friday. Now, what that means is that any bill with a fiscal note that had to go to Ways and Means, Appropriations, or a Transportation Committee had to pass by Friday. Otherwise, it was technically dead. Now, we will comment and say that that doesn't necessarily mean that that is going to be the case. Any of these bills with a fiscal note especially can be deemed necessary to implement the budget and can be pulled into the negotiations kind of at the end of session here to go home. They are still talking about, the Speaker, Jenkins, really wants to go home on time, which would be the 25th of this month. That said, the federal stimulus dollars coming in have kind of thrown a wrench in that whole plan to go home. Believe it or not, our legislature is having trouble figuring out how we're going to spend the almost $2 billion that the Fed is planning on sending our way. That becomes a problem down here on our local rural level, local government level, especially with the counties and county commissioners, because a lot of these different funding packages that come down from the federal government have a couple of things built into them. Number one is a use it or lose it clause. So, hey, we're going to give you $2 billion. If you don't use it by the end of 2021, you lose it. It'll revert back to the federal government, and then they'll reincorporate it into their ginormous budget. The other thing that they incorporate many times are other little stipulations where they say, a great example this year might be this money needs to be spent on a socially equitable fund, or where the money goes needs to have something to do or some component of climate change or carbon sequestration or something like that. The third component that oftentimes comes with federal dollars is a requirement to put this towards a new program. And all of these things become problematic for us, especially if there's a new program created, because it's difficult at the county level to turn away dollars that will help us, accomplish our tasks as local government officials, as you guys know. But what happens is that money will be available, say, for 2021, 2022, maybe, and they'll appropriate that for those 2 years. Then following that, we may be left with some sort of a program that we're required to implement that we don't have any backfilled money from either the Fed or the state to do that. And that'll put the state in a budget crunch again. And then, we end up down at the local level bearing the brunt of that. And it always comes back to well-raised taxes, and that's difficult to do when you're in a rural community. It's their last option. You don't want to have to go there. So We do have some concerns as that federal money comes down. We don't know exactly what strings are going to be attached to it. They're still trying to figure it out. So the other big conversation right now that is happening has been brought on by the Blake decision, and that would be the specifically talking about the unconstitutionality of Washington State's illicit drug or illicit substance possession rule. And so there's still a lot of legal questions around that. You guys have asked several, can we be sued for wrongful imprisonment? Again, I'm not an attorney. I don't have those answers. But what it is looking like, and what we do know, is that a lot of that burden is probably going to fall onto the state. And there's a lot of questions that come around that. And by burden, I mean the burden of the cost of going back and reevaluating or evaluating, say, possession was used as an exigent circumstance in someone's sentencing, or they got a more harsh sentence because they had some illicit substance on them. That individual will need to be resentenced. They may or may not, based on that resentencing, be released, may be held for a certain amount of time, but all of that takes court time. There's costs, there's fees, there's everything that you would expect to accompany that in terms of costs along with it. So that would be a huge cost for us to bear on the county level. So it is looking like that's going to be a state cost. They don't know timelines on these things, and then you start getting into the constitutionality of keeping people. And it's just a giant legal mess. We still don't have an answer. The legislators are trying to come up with some sort of an answer legally. Really, it's legal counsel that's going to try and do it. The legislators will just go, okay, cool, that's great, sounds good. Because most of them aren't attorneys, they don't know. So we don't know exactly what that's going to look like. The other big topic of conversation right now is the ag overtime lawsuit, and specifically the components about going retroactive on a lot of these, a lot of the wages, and that's still in the courts. We don't know for sure how that's going to come out either. They are working on it. There are bills on that, and right now, I'll just kind of move quickly to where we are specifically with the bills and with what's going on. We are basically in floor action right now, from now through the end of the session, and there's going to be a lot of back and forth. There's going to be a lot of up and down here. What we kind of see happening, and this is 100% conjecture on our part here, we think that there's a pretty big split in the Democratic caucus. And that would probably be between a more traditional moderate Democrat to a more, new age progressive position in the party. And that's why what we're seeing is really strange. We're not seeing run lists come out very frequently or very far ahead of when things are going to hit the floor. And so that would tell us that there's a lot of disagreement within that caucus. Since the Democrats do control both houses, they're trying to figure out what they can pass in their county votes. Because all they have to have is one or two defectors and they lose it. So that's definitely some of the stuff that's kind of going on behind closed doors. There's still a big conversation out there, kind of this big looming, the great compromise or whatever they want to call it, which would include a substantial carbon package, where cap and trade kind of situation. There would also be increased fuel taxes. And, that trickles down with the carbon stuff all the way down to what would be required of new building permits to cars too. I mean, everything. It would touch almost everything we do. So there's a lot of, basically that comes down as a tax. So there's a lot of concern about that. It's everything that our governor has been pushing for the last, 8-9 years that he's been in office. So that's some pretty big concern for us. Beyond that, we really don't know what that's going to look like. And to exacerbate that conversation, last week we have Senator Hobbs in the Senate, who's in charge of the Transportation Committee, and we have Representative Pai in the House, who's in charge of transportation. And as of about Friday, they started actually having conversations to try and bring their budgets together. I was admittedly a bit surprised that it had taken that long for them to actually really get into conversations and negotiations about what they're going to be doing. But I guess I shouldn't be surprised after this many years of doing this, that they just don't talk. So so what that means, and that really comes down to, we don't know what the transportation package is going to look like. They're not too terribly far apart. Transportation revenue package is going to be probably a little bit different. I would say if you were looking through transportation budgets, trying to figure out how to plan, for your county and what you might want to position for, I would probably suggest looking more at the Senate budget, since especially, Senator Hobbs has a knack or a tendency to come to the negotiation table and then do whatever he wants anyway. And he kind of just gets his way a lot of times. And Representative Fye, there's nothing wrong with how he does it. It seems that they end up going the Senate direction. So there's definitely been a lot of conversations again around how the budgets are going to shake out. And until we get down to the very end, it's definitely going to be kind of a crapshoot. And the reason we say that is, to be quite honest about this year, what we do as lobbyists, being on the front lines, is we interact with the legislative aides, we interact with the agency people, we interact with the governor's staff, we interact with the legislators as need be, and in these conversations. One thing that we never really viewed our role as, just because we were there and it kind of got overlooked, was accountability within the legislature. And when you don't have a whole bunch of lobbyists, realistically, the lobbyists are the ones who are there. You don't have a whole bunch of lobbyists staring at you in committee, trying to stalk you and ask you questions. Why did you make that decision? Why did you vote that way? Looking at you when you're voting on the floor, it's pretty easy to disregard the constituency and really kind of go whatever direction you want to go. And so, quite frankly, we've been railroaded pretty bad this year. And there's not been a lot of heads up when the stuff's been coming around the corner. So the Blake decision, while it was kind of a pain, it was a big deal in our state. It's been a pain to deal with on the local level and create some uncertainty. It really did slow down a lot of the social justice conversations. It slowed down a whole lot of the judicial reform conversations, specifically because they realized how expensive it is to make one little change. And I realized that releasing a whole bunch of prisoners or, reversing a bunch of these convictions based on possession isn't necessarily a little change, but it's a single subject, single issue, which is possession of illicit substance. And if you start looking at some of the other changes that were proposed, everything from resentencing, changing the age at which a minor can be charged, and increasing the age of a minor, and all these things be affected. They've really realized that this is very difficult, very expensive. So that's been one of the positives that's come out of this. What we are truly hoping for right now, if there are bills that are in rules or that may come to the floor, we may still be able to head some of this stuff off in rules. And if something comes to the floor and we get a creative amendment, or there's an opportunity for a creative amendment from one of your legislators or someone on the Republican side that the other side does not want to vote on, then those bills may still die. Of course, they will come back next year, but hopefully we'll be in person and we'll be able to really address these bills and address these conversations. So with that, it's not a real substantive report. If we're talking specifically about bills or specifically about issues, it's kind of more of an in general. Do you guys have any questions on what you've seen or what we might see coming down the line? At this point, it is tough to hold things in rules. Normally, we would be sitting in the Rules Committee watching this happen right now, but we're not allowed to do that. We're not able to be in the room and be present for all this, so it does make that difficult. So, are there any questions? Anything I might be able to try and clarify for you guys?
Questions?
Go ahead.
Hey, Zach, Brad Peck. I've been tracking these bills as you have for weeks, if not months now. They got a pretty good handle on what the bills are doing. But you mentioned early on federal dollars, and state and county maybe having issues about how to fund that. Was there any discussion among any parties that you've heard of regarding that federal money having to do with supplant language?
Realistically, only from the county level, you know, within WASAC, within the Association of Counties, in conversations with counties. I think the cities do have some concerns with that as well. But in terms of from the legislative perspective, you know, or the actual voting members, you know, no, that has not been something at the top of the list. We do have several county or former county commissioners or current county commissioners serving in our legislature. They get it, but I think there's 5 or 6 over there. You know, it's a pretty small minority, and you know, you can only say so much. So to answer your question, no, we haven't heard a lot of conversation regarding it.
Is it your impression that the federal money that is expected to flow down is also specifically earmarked and has non-supplant language also?
I think that is one of the big questions. So that is one of the big lingering kind of overhead. What is that? You know, what's the supplant or non-supplant language going to look like? Is it going to be earmarked? And if so, you know, how are they going to do that? Is it going to be general? For example, transportation or infrastructure or education? Or is it going to be more specific? Is taking education? Is it going to be K-12 education? Or even to get more granular on that, is it going to be K-12 education for schools that have approved some certain kind of sex education?
Okay.
You know, we just went through that initiative. You know, so how, that is the question. How granular are they going to go down on their earmarks, and where are they going to tell us we have to use that money?
So last question, Zach. FI's transportation bill out of the House over a decade or so raises, I forget how many billion more than Hobbs, but it's 3 to 5 billion more, something like that. Most of the discussion for the last couple of weeks has centered around using that money for restoring and for maintenance and for bringing roads up to status, as opposed to new construction, new infrastructure. I'm pretty current on what the dialogue was as of last Friday. Have you heard anything since noon last Friday on that topic?
So in regards to that, since I think we just first started hearing a little bit come down from the Fed talking about the infrastructure plan, you know, and Biden really wants to make what they're calling that once in a generation investment. I think the conversation right now is kind of, you know, they're trying to bide their time as much as they can to see what the federal dollars in terms of transportation are going to look like and how far they're going to trickle down. You know, is that going to be limited to federal highways, Interstate 90, you know, for example, and adjunct facilities? Or is that going to be able to kind of flow down? I know this doesn't apply to Washington State, but you get into a state like Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, to be more precise, there are hundreds of bridges in Philadelphia that are the responsibility of the city or the state that are basically dilapidated. And so when the Fed's going to look at that and say, okay, if we want this city to be vital here, we're going to have to put money into those bridges. And then Washington's going to look at that and go, hey, you paid for their bridges. Come on, we've got bridges over here that we need to pay for. We have roads over here we need to pay for. So they're going to try and buy their time as long as they can. But in terms of the conversation, as you stated it, I think we're still in that same kind of vein right there of wanting to repair existing infrastructure before we start putting money towards, you know, any new additional infrastructure. Obviously, there's obviously a need for new roads. You know, you start looking at the north-south freeway in Spokane is always a big contention for Eastern Washington, the Spokane area. You know, they need more money to do it. It's not an existing infrastructure project. I mean, it is an existing project, but they're building new infrastructure. So where do those come in? And there is quite a bit of money in there for that particular project. So, you know, it's kind of a in one ear, out the other. They talk out of one side of their mouth and actually do something different. So when it comes right down to it, we're going to see. But I think you're right. The focus really is on existing infrastructure.
Okay, so just to make sure, what I think I heard you say was the federal money is likely to be new infrastructure almost exclusively, and the state money, whether it's FI or Hobbs bill, whichever one it is, still has a strong focus on on maintenance and upkeep and repair?
Especially on the state side, the Fed is still a question. But I think that, they're looking at new or replacing new, remove bridge, put new bridge in.
Yeah, well, the argument on Friday was that
the
argument on Friday was the state was going to continue to lean toward restoration and repair with the hopes that the feds would provide money for new construction. So I was just looking to see if you'd heard anything different than that. It doesn't sound like anything has changed, so thank you.
The hope is still there. You are correct. Yeah, and nothing's really changed until we see that package come down from the federal government, and they got to get it out of the Senate. So that who knows.
Commissioner Mullen, any questions? Got a couple here. I got the Wasac hot sheet in front of me here, and on other bills support, ES House Bill 1241, planning under the Growth Management Act, passed the House 54-43. That sort of is getting close. So who was the 43 that were objecting to it? Are these Republicans or Democrats?
Those are going to be, I could probably pull that up here real quick. I'm trying to work into my internet here and see if I can.
The other one on there, the other question I got, why you can probably be looking it up after you find that one, is the ES House Bill 1332 concerning property tax deferral during the COVID-19 pandemic, passed 96-1 in the Senate, or in the House, excuse me, and it's got the second reading in the Senate. But Wasac opposes this. Why is that?
So the concern with this, I can't necessarily speak to why I'll start with 1332, why the legislature voted the way they did. We have some speculation. But the reason for opposing in terms of pushing back or tax deferral during the COVID-19 pandemic, the concern really comes into when the county needs to pay their bills. If your bonds come due in June, July, and you've deferred your tax collection, enough of your tax collection to the end of the year, now you have a gap. And there's been a big conversation there on how that goes. The other components of this has been Representative Bowles' bill. I believe that was 1410 this year. And he is going to push the property tax deferral or basically a property tax deferral as long as he is an elected official. And so part of the conversation has been, okay, well, what do we do with this? How do we deal with him and this agenda? Because he is, basically going to push this as long as he's there, and eventually he's going to get it. And so part of the conversation about that is this the year to maybe pull something in and look at what this might end up being, or, take an unpleasant or unhappy compromise. How do we do that, and what does that look like for us? So that's going to be an ongoing conversation. And as we pull that together, it is going to come back. So I think that was basically part of what they looked like or what they looked at. That said, I really don't know. So looking at the vote roll call on 1241, it was, basically a party line vote, with a couple of defectors. And excused was Representative Hackney. So, as we look at this and you start talking about your comprehensive plans and your shoreline master plan and the shoreline management plan, they are looking at this being a 5-year program. So I can't speak to why the legislators that did what they did or voted what they voted in that particular respect. But you're right, it is close. And some of this close stuff, and especially since this deals with tribal recognition and tribal basically consultation as you decide to make different resolutions and work with them. We may be coming back next year for this. It's still, we haven't seen it come across any lists. Let me check as of right now. I don't know that it is. Okay, so it's still sitting in rules in the Senate. So I don't know. We'll see what happens. I know from what I hear, they're still trying to hold it there.
All right.
The 1332, that one, chances are with how it came out of the House, they're probably going to pull it to the floor. My guess is as they come down to the final hour, it'll be part of maybe a compromise or a deal as they push this thing through. The good positive part on this one is, you do have to apply for it, for the deferral, and the delinquencies. And, I guess it's debatable on, how many people would actually utilize it. So there's still questions there.
All righty. Well, thank you, Zach. If there's no other questions, we'll let you get off the phone.
Zach,
Absolutely. Well, thank you guys. Oh,
hey, Zach, on that last bill, if I remember, Bowles runs that bill every year. And one of the things that's happened is some businesses, depending on what class they're in, have figured out that when his bill attempts to waive fees and penalties, as well as allowing the payments to be made later, they've actually calculated that it's cheaper for them to pay the penalties and fees and pay it months later. And they do it intentionally as a business maneuver, and it leaves the county short of paying their bills. That was part of the issue. And Zach, real quick on 1152, which is the one that deals primarily with boards of health.
Yep.
As of last Friday, it was still at the point where I'll just speak for Benton Franklin Board of Health because it varies a little bit with what county in the state. But it was still sitting on the premise that if you had a Citizens Advisory Board for Board of Health in place on January 1st of this year, you didn't have to add one. But if your Board of Health was made up of county commissioners and on January 1 you did not have an advisory board, then you had to create one. And the citizen members of that have to be an equal number to the number of elected officials on that board. That bill has been batted back and forth more times than a Wimbledon match, I think. And the last I heard, that's where it sat, and I haven't heard any change. I'm guessing you probably haven't either, but I thought I'd better ask.
Oh, as of right now, no, it sits in rules, and you are absolutely correct. This bill has been back and forth, and they brought in, the other bill. I actually forgot the number because they incorporated it into this, but it was Richelli's other bill, with the comprehensive health and the Board of Health, the comprehensive health districts in your Board of Health. I am expecting there's probably going to be some sort of a floor amendment on this, and that's been a lot of the conversation. Now, a floor amendment on this would be absolutely fantastic because then it has to go back to the House for concurrence. If that happens, the House may not concur with that particular amendment. I think that's why it's taking so long sitting in rules right now. From what we've heard, I don't think they're going to let the bill die. So we'll probably see this one come right to the bitter end. And this has been a huge point of contention, when you start talking from urban to rural counties. And, kind of like we talked from the very beginning, I mean, they've helped us out a little bit with some of the changes they've made in this back and forth. But this is clearly a bill. We know what Richelli's motives were behind it, but this is clearly a bill that really speaks to the urban areas, and it's causing us a lot of problems. So we're hoping that we can get it killed, but I think they're going to work on it till, like I said, the very bitter end, and somebody's probably going to give in, and we'll end up with some semblance of what the bill looks like. I think it's probably going to stay pretty close to where it is right now.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Zach.
Thank you. All right. Thank you guys very much. I appreciate it greatly. It's always a pleasure talking with you, and we will chat again.
All right. Thank you, sir.
All right. Thanks, guys.
With that, we'll move on to the approval of the minutes from the March 23rd, 2021 meeting. Is there any addition, changes, or corrections?
No changes.
Hearing none, the consensus is we approve it. Now we'll move to the coroner's update to the commissioners. Welcome, Curtis.
Thank you. All right. Commissioners, we thank you for letting us come and spend a little bit of time with you this evening, and also those that are in attendance and watching via the web. I want to talk about just a few things this evening of what the coroner's office does. Commissioners, some of this will be repetitive in the annual report that I've sent to you at the beginning of the year. So the coroner's office, our staff is pretty small. We have myself and then a chief deputy coroner, Ruben Marquez, and Nicole Lee, who works occasionally on a weekend. Some of our duties. The coroner investigates deaths that occur when someone has not been seen by a doctor within the last 20 or 36 hours. We investigate suicides, homicides, accidents, and natural deaths. Communicate with the next of kin. This may be notification of death, after investigation, sharing the findings, and if applicable, the results of an autopsy. When that does occur, we like to, if we can, go to the family's home and be in their presence, not have them come to our office. It's hard enough to go over things, let them be in a familiar setting if we can. We're on call 24 hours, 365 days a year. I always have a phone with me. I always carry it to be able to answer questions or respond when we needed to. Full body examinations. What these are is examining natural deaths to make sure there's no signs of foul play, or on seniors, we want to make sure there's no elderly abuse. Homicides, we document the wounds and other evidence. Drug overdose, make sure are there drugs or other dangerous objects still on the decedent. And we employ forensic pathologists for all of our autopsies. We complete the cause and manner section of death certificates. Sometimes we have doctors that do not want to sign a death certificate. So that time we visit with the doctor, request medical records, review those, and then we're usually able to obtain enough information that we can sign the death certificate. If not, we may have to do an autopsy. We draw or provide training and education to the public in the schools. We try to go to the schools and do career fairs with them and volunteer at the schools. Master disasters. Let's see, I'm off my thing here a little bit. We draw blood and other fluids for toxicology testing, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. Coordinate with the Organ Procurement Organization. This is better known as OPO. With our information that we give them, it assists them in determining if the individual is able to be a donor for organ donation. This kind of shows you a graph here of the manners of death. These are for just the last 2 years, 2019 and 2020. We had 6 homicides. 2019, we had 4 suicides, and last year we had 8 suicides. Accidental deaths in 2019, we had 13, and 2020, we had 26. Natural deaths, you can see there, the majority of those, 2024 in 19, and 326 this last year. Another category is undetermined. We did not have any of those, fortunately. We are very happy with that. So Franklin County comprises of 1,265 square miles. We're asked to cover all of that. At times, we are needed in more than one place at a time. And we are very fortunate that now we have the vehicles, transport pickups, that we can be in more than one place at a time. Sometimes we're needed here in Pasco, and other times maybe even as far up to Palouse Falls or the boundaries of the county. Some of the goals that we have achieved, that we have set, was obtaining the transport vehicles. These are some pickups that allow us to transport, and they've been a very valuable asset to our office. Myself and Ruben Marquez have both been American Board Medical Legal Death Investigators. We've achieved that certification. And I'm proud to say that as of last week, yesterday, we accomplished our, sorry, I get emotional on this one. We had a goal of having our office certified. We had a goal of last October, but like everyone, due to travel restrictions with COVID, we had to put that off. And then I said this last Monday, we accomplished that. And we are one of 6 or 7 coroner's offices in the state that have achieved that accreditation.
Curtis, excuse me, is that the first time that the Franklin County Coroner's Office has ever been certified? As far as you know?
No. The other coroner did have it. It had lapsed. In 2017, it lapsed. And so we had to start all over, though. And so we started from ground zero again.
Okay. Well, congratulations. Well done.
Thank you. There is legislation, Senate House Bill 1326. I'm not sure of the status on it. I tried to check on it earlier today and I couldn't see it. But if that does pass, that will require those 2 requirements to be met by each office. We obtained a TrueNarc field drug analyzer and a rapid urine drug test. This drug analyzer is able to detect over 400 drugs. It's a field test, so we don't have to bring them back to the office. And the same with the urine test. It will detect over 15 drugs. And both of these tools were utilized today. The TrueNarc analyzer was obtained through a grant through the state. And we are one of 2 that have that machine here on the east side of the mountains. And we use it a lot with law enforcement for safety of our own selves. We weren't void of COVID challenges, just like everybody else. With ours, we were still asked to go into homes where COVID was present, whether the decedent had COVID or someone at the house had COVID. We still were asked to, we still had to respond to those deaths. Our job doesn't allow us to work remotely. So while most of the county was maybe not here at the office or at the campus, we were still having to work. And then also our pathologist that would travel over here to do our autopsies retired because of COVID, his concerns for safety. We were able to secure a service from the Snohomish County Medical Examiner's Office to perform our autopsies. This is another situation where the transport trucks have been a cost savings. We would be paying $700 per transport, and we did 20 autopsies last year. So that's a savings of $14,000 that we would have had to find somewhere because that was not in our budget to pay. Another great concern for everyone around, and is the concerns of suicides during COVID. Anything more than 0 is too many deaths through suicide. The big concern has been more the teenage years. And you can see here in 2020, we had a total of 8 suicides, but 1 in that kind of real focused, concerned age bracket. 2019 and 2018, we had 0 in that age. And in 17, we had 2. And again, in 2016, we had 0. I've gone back over 10 years and kind of pulled the stats. And just so people are aware, these stats are pretty much all the same for the last 10 years. And I do have to say that none of these I have found in the last year can be contributed to COVID-related incidents. Toxicology report. So we have 2 labs that we send our toxicology to. The private labs here are shown in orange. The blue is Washington State Patrol Labs. They're over in Shoreline, over in the Seattle area. With our private labs, we have a turnaround rate of about 14 days. We're right at 14 days. With the state lab, we're averaging anywhere from 90 to 120 days turnaround. Now with that, death certificate's going to have pending toxicology as the cause and manner of death. When that happens, the decedent's family is not able to receive life insurance payouts, settlements of estate, possible financial assets being frozen, criminal prosecution and autopsy reports not being completed. So what are our goals moving forward? We want to increase that turnaround for toxicology. We want to move more to private labs, less to the state labs. The private labs cost for each test is $136. Expanded test, that's just a basic standard one. If we have to go, some of them even can cost up to $650. In reference earlier, I said that those machines were used today. There's a new drug that we became aware of today that I'm afraid we'll have to have that expanded test to find it. Establishing a budget line item or a death certificate review. The budget line would be an annual budget item. The review fee is a fee that would be assessed to each death certificate filed in the county. For example, if we had a filing fee of $20 with 300 deaths per year, that'd be $6,000. Over the last 4 years, we've averaged 40 toxicology tests per year. So the 40 times the 136 would be $5,440. This would cover that cost. And last, we'd like to explore the purchase of a Randox machine through a grant. What the Randox machine does is it would take blood samples and test for the presence of alcohol or drugs. Sometimes our urine test just doesn't work because we're not able to get urine. And so we want to look at something like that. That may be something that's down the road, but it's a goal that we have set. Those are some of the things I have. Any questions?
Questions, commissioners?
Curtis, you mentioned, I think it was $136 for the private toxicology test. You may have said it and I might have missed it, but did you say what the cost is when they go to WSP?
I did not say that. The cost for WSP is, there is no cost for that. It's just the delay that it cost. What's sad about that too is WSP, when they get behind, they end up sending to the same private lab that we do. And that private lab returns it back to the state lab, they review it, and then they send it back to us. And those are the ones we're seeing more so in the 120-day range. I had a call last week from WSP in regards to one that we'd sent to them in January, the 1st of January, and they're just entering it in now. So
I'm just curious if anyone has raised the issue of maybe a large-scale contract with the private sector to do these. I don't know what it's costing WSP to run the toxicology system, but I'm thinking that might be one of those opportunities for a smart legislator to look at the cost savings of scaling back WSP and going with large-scale statewide contract in the private sector. Just a thought.
This 136 is a discounted rate that the state has contracted with them to help with their backlog. In our audit this last week, the auditors were telling me that there are some states, some counties that are shutting their toxicology labs down and going to the private labs because of the cost.
It'd be interesting to do the math and see what it costs WSP to do a test.
Yeah. WSP did tell us, well, it was 2019 because we didn't have it last year, but one of their seminars, meetings that I attended there with them, and we asked them what their challenge is with getting the test results back to us so late. And it takes 2 years to get a chemist and scientist trained and qualified to read these toxicology results. Our state doesn't pay much for those people. So once they get them trained, after that 2 years, they move on to another state that's paying more, or to the private labs that pay more. And so now they're back to that cycle of, okay, we're training more again. The state also didn't have the infrastructure to ramp up its testing. And so they're trying to move that forward. So that's what they have told us.
Well, no offense to our state employees, but it wouldn't be the first time that the private sector could do something like that better, faster, and cheaper. So
there are times I will receive with the private labs, I get results emailed directly to me into our program that we use. It's called MDI software. And I see those come in on the weekends, even on Saturdays or Sundays. And I know the state lab doesn't work those days.
Commissioner Mullen. So Curtis, besides the delay, has there been any other problems with the state lab?
No, they've been good.
Accurate.
It's just the delay. And that's the hardest thing is when you're asking a family, well, I know financially you're strapped and you're dependent on those life insurances. You know, you're going to have to wait another 120 days before you can get that filed. Or your bank account seized, is frozen until it comes back. And families have asked us, is there any way you can put something besides pending? And car insurances, even if it's an automobile accident, they'll want to know what the toxicology reports was there alcohol involved or some drugs? And so for that, they put a pending and put a hold on their payout even. So that's the biggest concerns we see, other than autopsy reports being filed. Part of our accreditation was we had to be within a 60-day period of having those toxicology reports back. They kind of waived that with us because it was something out of our control, that they understood what our state lab is doing, and talking with other counties in our state, they understand that we're not alone.
I'd also like to congratulate you on that, getting that certification accreditation. So the last thing is the one machine that you do have in your possession now, is it a duplicate to what the sheriff has, or are you guys sharing that machine? And the new one that you're wanting to get for the blood test, is that something that we can also use for the sheriff's office and your office?
Yeah. So the first question is, the machine that we have, the sheriff does not have that at this point.
Are you letting him use it if he wants to?
Yes.
Good,
They
fantastic.
bring stuff over to us frequently.
Good.
Things coming through the gel, or they find drugs, or if we're at the scene with them, we'll test these drugs. What this machine does is it sends a laser into a solid pill or powder form. We even have a dipstick type thing we can put in liquid form, and it'll tell whether it's methamphetamine, fentanyl, benzonine, heroin, cocaine, anything that we find there. We had one situation where an individual overdosed. It wasn't until we were doing our body exam that we found more substance, powder substance, and it was fentanyl. I don't know if people know the extreme and the dangerousness of fentanyl. Fentanyl, if you took 4 to 7 grains of sugar, that's enough to kill you with fentanyl. Fentanyl is not, these people that make it, they don't have any standards for it. An analogy I always say is it's like making chocolate chip cookies. One cookie might have 1 chocolate chip in it, and the next one might have 4. And that's how these pills are. So they take a pill. Oh, that didn't do, I'm fine with that. The next pill they have causes death. And so we're able to test those on the scene and let the law enforcement know what they're dealing with as well.
And the other machine that you were talking about, testing blood, what does that run?
So that one, I checked with Snohomish County, who has one, and those run about $50,000. So I'd really like to look at getting a grant, but that is definitely a machine that law enforcement could use with us. Pasco, the sheriff's office, that would give them a quick turnaround as well. At least they would know that, okay, there is a presence of there, because within 20 minutes, you have a result. There's been times where we cannot obtain urine, and then Snohomish will take the blood and have them run a Randox test on it, and it'll come back with drugs on there.
All right. Well, thank you very much for the presentation. And
all right. I just want to thank you guys, county commissioners, and also thank the members of our county. You're the ones that make these things possible for us. If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't accomplish our goals that we set. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, do you mind if I ask just a couple
Absolutely.
of brief questions? Thank you. First is more of a comment than a question, but thank you for letting us participate in your certification. And I want to commend your office, particularly for the relationship we have together. It's been very positive, and I appreciate that. The question I have I realize it's a delicate subject, but I want to talk just for a minute about the suicide rate. You indicated that in 2020, we had 8 suicide events, and in 2019, there were 4. A lot of folks may consider that a trend, and I realize a 2-year data window is probably not enough to project a trend. But you said that, and this is why I'm bringing it up, is it's a lot of folks have been concerned about the mental health issues related to COVID and the restrictions being placed on people having a negative mental impact. But I believe you said that you had been able to determine that those suicides that occurred in 2020 were not related to COVID. I want to make sure I'm clear on that. But if that's the case, can you describe in a delicate way what were the reasons for those? And is there a trend associated with those other causes?
Most all of the suicides we've seen, and I can date myself back, even my former profession, I saw it too, was depression. These ones that we have had, the individuals were dealing with depression long before COVID came out of China. The other causes, depression is the minor one, so we do have the mental health. And I'm not saying COVID didn't or can't help contribute to these things. The other ones are usually marriage breakups, those types of things, financial disparity. Those are other ones that have caused the suicides. It's important to put out there those signs, and I hope people will learn what those signs are of depression, what signs people are putting out that I'm suffering quietly. If we can learn what those are, people can maybe help and just help other individuals know that you're not alone, that you're going through a tough time. We're here to help you and talk to them and be able to talk them. Yeah.
All right, well, thank you.
Well, thank you.
Curtis. Good presentation. And with that, we'll move down to the next agenda item, which is establishing the Franklin County Citizens Commission on salaries for elected officials. And Carly, you're going to present. And at this time, I'd like to open the public hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a project we've been working on for quite some time. The board had asked a little over a year ago for Keith and I to work on establishing such a commission. Right about a year ago, we had planned on presenting this at our next evening meeting, and here we are at our next evening meeting. The statute for the Salary Commission does not require a public hearing process. However, the success of the commission hinges on public involvement. And so we thought it made a lot of sense to get this issue in front of the public and to hear from the public their input before the board decides to move forward. So I can answer any questions. That you have the draft ordinance that we have discussed previously. There have been no changes in the last year.
Commissioners, questions?
Carly, I saw a couple of references in the ordinance and in the background paperwork that talked about various offices using random processes, and I think it's sufficient the way it is, but assuming that this moves forward, I would encourage that we all kind of give proper attention to the process to make sure that, in fact, things are properly randomized. People have varying opinions of what a random selection is out of a group, right? And so that was really the only thing I saw, and it's not really a concern. I think it's sufficient the way it is. It's just an observation that might be something we keep an eye on.
Sure.
So if you pick these people at random, how do you know that they're willing to participate?
So that's where the process that Ashley Hyen, our elections administrator, put together is basically that the through the elections office, they would randomize a list and then send to my office. My office would essentially send the top two from each district a letter introducing the commission, what they do, what the commitment could be, requesting a response, and then we will do that as many times as we need to do it until we have the appropriate number of people from each district. So it is voluntary, but we'll reach out and request response.
Does the state set any guidelines to what salaries are?
The state sets minimum salaries for each position.
Has there been any thought to taking what the state sets as a guideline for salaries and just working off a percentage for local counties?
There's been discussion that the salaries are significantly lower than where the salaries sit now. So we have had a lot of conversation around elected official salaries. quite frankly, my position on this is generally the salaries of elected officials are more of a political conversation than they are one that's based on any, you know, compensation principles in the HR world. You know, so there's certainly been a lot of different ideas thrown out there. You know, certainly at this point, you know, this board has the authority to set those salaries. They can't be reduced during a term of office, but they can certainly be changed by the will of this board.
Just an observation for people who may be new to this subject, and working from memory here. So if you go look it up and I got it wrong, apologies in advance, but I think for a county our size, the minimum, and this statute was written many years ago, but it was, I think around 40,000 a year for a county commissioner. But what's unique in the discussion is that the three of us are a legislative body. We have the authority by statute to set salaries for other electeds, but of course not for ourselves unless you're setting a salary, say for a commissioner who is at the end of a term, has to run for reelection, then you set the salary and whomever ends up being elected comes in at that salary. It's not all that complicated, but it certainly does help to depoliticize the process, in my opinion, when you have some other body recommending salaries for the Board of Commissioners. But as I understand it, because we are the legislative body, the Salary Commission will make a recommendation, still has to be adopted by the legislative body for folks who are the elected officials and the coroners and the others.
No.
Not for them at all?
No.
I know for us, we don't, but for the other electeds, those are automatic with the salary recommendation?
The way the ordinance is written, and the way that the statute prescribes for salary commissions is that the salary commission, what they set as the salaries, those salaries are filed with the auditor and those are the salaries going forward. Unless it's a reduction and then it takes effect the beginning of the next term. The only mechanism to challenge that is through a referendum process filed by the public.
And that's for all the elected positions?
That's how we have the ordinance written. It doesn't have to be for all the elected positions. However, given the resources that will go into establishing and maintaining the commission, we thought it wise to make full use of that commission if that's the direction that we go.
Well, I think it's fine. You know, I forget how many times now and what year it was, but I've made multiple recommendations that we commissioners, not the other electeds, commissioners just go to the state minimum, and it's never been adopted. Now that I'm a few years down the road in this process and looking back on it, kind of the opinion you get what you pay for, and I think a salary commission probably is a fine way to let the community determine what is reasonable, especially given that the statute, and I'll ask you to speak to this for the benefit of the public, the statute speaks to people who have special qualifications who have to be on the salary commission.
That is correct. So in addition to the 6 citizens that are selected, 2 from each commissioner district, there are professional positions that round out the 10-member commission. I'm just going to check my notes because I want to make sure I get it right. So there's one position that has to be a member of the business community, one who is a professional in personnel management, one in the legal profession, and then one in organized labor. So you've got the citizen constituency, which is the majority of the commission, and then you've got the professionals that realistically bring any of those compensation expertise and that.
Does legal profession mean an attorney?
It means someone who works in the legal profession. The statute's not that specific, so certainly that's something that we could, I would interpret it as an attorney.
Possibly a paralegal.
Possibly a paralegal, but somebody with some legal, probably to make sure that things are set in a legal manner, that that everyone's conducted themselves because they are essentially setting that policy versus playing an advisory role. Having that expertise would be certainly advisable. It's, as far as statutes go, a very prescriptive statute, and seems to be one of the better thought out statutes that I've ever worked with, which was quite refreshing in working through this process.
My question is, with 10, if you have a vigorous debate and it's even 5-5, who breaks the tie?
The ordinance is written so that salary changes, it's required to have 60%.
Oh, 60%,
Mhm.
okay.
Yeah, so there doesn't, I have the same question, so that you can't be deadlocked
That
that way.
answers that, thank you.
Mhm.
Carly, in recent years, you've looked at our elected salaries compared to what we consider to be reasonable comparator counties, is that right?
I have periodically, yes.
Without a lot of specifics, is it your opinion that elected salaries in Franklin County today tend to be compared to comparable counties in eastern Washington or across the state, that ours tend to be a little on the low side, a little on the high side, or about the same?
Depends on which ones you look at. Get
Which
elected,
offices or which counties?
yes.
Both.
Elected official salaries are much less consistently applied than non-elected employee salaries. And so that's why I go back to, they tend to be much more political decisions than they are, based on other compensation principles. And so they can be all over the map.
Yeah, and they do vary.
Yes.
Don't take this as a complaint. I'm here by choice and I love being here, but I think I'm one of the longest serving elected officials currently in the courthouse. I believe I'm also the least compensated, and that's not a complaint. I'm fine with it. But it illustrates the point that in the private sector, salaries are often tied to experience and credentials. And here, anybody who wants to run and gets elected comes in, you have a responsibility for a given job. And I think a salary commission could be beneficial from the standpoint that it helps to sort of levelize things among the elected official responsibilities. There are a few that are outliers, the sheriff and the prosecutor, for example, but many of the others should have fairly comparable compensation, I would think. And I think the salary commission helps accomplish that. And if somebody goes and looks at all the salaries and they find out that I'm second from the bottom or not the bottom, fine. The point is that there's variance even among those of us here in the courthouse.
Sure.
Any other questions? Okay, this is a public hearing, so we can hear from the public on this.
Only mic. Fancy.
Do we have to keep the mask on? Or can we take? Okay. So I just had, first of all, I also had some questions for our coroner. Quickly, I didn't know if it would be possible for insurance companies or even families that are wanting to get the test results sooner, if they could pay for the lab fees. I wasn't sure if that was possible, but I'd wondered about that.
This is a public hearing on
Yeah,
the
I'm sorry.
on the
Okay.
salaries, but we do have open comment, public comment
Sure.
next.
Okay, don't leave. So the question that I had was, would this salary commission really be looking at the average income of the Franklin County citizen and what they can afford to pay, instead of our electeds looking at it as a salary for them? They should look at it as compensation to what the county can really afford, because gas taxes are going up exponentially. People are making less, and yet the government is taking more. And so I was hoping that especially with the census data coming out, I'm not sure, I can't remember if that was one of the questions. It used to be, but to make sure that we're not taking more than what the Franklin County citizens can afford. So that was just my point. So, and my other point was Mossy Rock mayor, who was the stand-up guy in the state, amazing, I believe makes $180 a month. So I don't think you always get what you pay for. Sometimes you get a better deal.
Okay, thank you. Next.
I just wanted to, my name is Steve Simmons. I just had a quick comment about this Citizens Commission. I'm just kind of concerned about this, the special interests and having people from other areas like the union rep and things like that. It just worries me that there could be an agenda there that possibly the citizenry portion of that could lose some effectiveness in being able to influence that board when you get special interests like union members in there and things like that. I wouldn't want that to influence or have influence on that. I don't know if that was a concern that had been brought up or how that actually was going to work in that commission.
Carly, isn't the union rep one of the required ones under state statute?
Yes, it is.
Okay, and it wasn't just specifically unions at all. It was what the other ones that you had listed. I don't remember them all.
Business, professional, personal management, legal profession, and organized labor.
So how on that commission, how many of those versus how many citizens?
6 citizens.
6 citizens
And 4.
and 4. Okay, thank you.
Do we know how the professionals are chosen? Are they chosen in the same way that the citizens are chosen? As far as how do we find somebody that is in business and how do we find somebody that is in a legal profession?
There would be an application process.
So it potentially could be, as Mr. Simmons said, a special interest could come in and petition to be a part of that commission.
They could apply to be a part of that commission. And
Sure.
then, yeah.
I had a very similar concern as he had as it being not as potentially as effective as it could be. And I do think this is very, very important. This has been a topic of discussion and concern in some discussions over the last multiple number of years of the salary of the commissioners. And I think that this is a fine way to find a solution to that we potentially can all get behind, is come to an appreciation that commissioners didn't set their own salary, but the citizens had the opportunity to have input in that. So I think that that's important. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Carly, quick question on the application form. There's boxes where people can indicate whether they feel qualified to represent business, personnel management, legal profession, organized labor, et cetera. Is this the same form that would be used for the random process?
Yeah.
Okay, so they are 2 separate trains, and one would produce random people from the voter rolls, and the other train would be volunteers filling out this application.
Correct. So we would advertise for volunteers for the certain professional positions, and then the ones from the voter rolls, we would send out a letter. I would anticipate a letter from my office with some, crafted wording to get somebody excited about what they could do for their community kind of deal, and explaining what it would do, but more of a solicitation at that point to respond and join the commission versus the other way would be voluntary.
Do we have any criteria by which we would determine these qualifications? I mean, there are, I think, many people who could mark the box that says that they have personnel management experience or business experience. Is pretty broad. What sort of criteria would we use to determine whether or not they meet the threshold?
We don't have that specifically laid out in the ordinance. However, it would likely make sense for the board to require some procedure for that to be laid out. The ordinance points to the county administrator's office and HR to work together to support however needed. I think it would make sense for the board to require us to come to you with a procedure for how we're going to evaluate candidates to follow, but then that would be more of an administrative procedure that isn't appropriate to be part of the ordinance, but would be a supporting process.
like the Washington Administrative Code that implements state statutes?
Very similar.
Same process,
Yes.
okay.
Since I started becoming involved in the Franklin County politics, I've noticed a couple of anomalies that I've never even heard before in normal life. One of them is with employees taking their benefits in the form of salary payments. And the other one is employees actually getting to vote on how much money they make. Let's be realistic. Us out here in the audience here, we're the employers. People sitting behind the desk are the employees. And, I think a salary commission would be great. I don't think the employees should be telling the employers how many cups of coffee they're going to purchase. I think that's up to the employers to determine. Thank you.
There was a lot of this that was already out there in the election period, and there's some misnomers in that. Typically, these commissions pay more, and that is a trend. It adds another layer of bureaucracy. And citizens have the opportunity to come in here every day or dial in if they need to. And I think the check and balances goes directly to you, the commissioners. If we don't like what you're doing, we pull you out, period. So I don't think we need another layer of commission. And that's not to deny the voter or the county citizens their voice. I don't think that that's been denied here. I am concerned very much that those roles would be influenced in this community, one way or the other. Whether you guys are here, and you run your course, and somebody else comes in, we have a problem, I think, sometimes with people trying to influence positions in those positions, and it concerns me greatly. Thank you.
Is there any other comments? Is there anybody on the phone?
Not for this subject, I do have.
So Carly, I have one question. You may not know the answer, but what is the incumbent reelection percentage? Do incumbents get knocked out very often? I mean, that year when they voted themselves a pay raise, the incumbent usually gets reelected, correct? How many incumbents have lost?
My understanding is that common wisdom is that incumbents generally have a better chance of getting
Yep.
reelected, but
I agree.
Certainly that's kind of outside my wheelhouse.
And I think that the commissioner salary should be out of our hands, as should the redistricting of our district. So it just takes away the appearance. And that's where I think we need to be. Is there any other comments? Yes.
I can make one as one of those elected officials. And as I sit here and hear that, hey, you're going to get a raise or a demotion. I think it's important to know that we need professionalism in our offices. And that's one thing I found, and I try to strive for in our office here. And I'm also very cognizant of us. Our taxes are all due this month. We write a check out. Yes, you are my boss. I work for you. I want to make sure that you're getting the bang for your buck. I've seen places where if you lower the standards, you're going to get that standard met. If you raise the bar, those that are willing to raise the bar and come to that bar are going to perform for the best, and you're going to get your dollar's worth. I was one of the ones that said, I'm for the commission, the salary commission. If you do come in, and I've heard what Michelle had said, that some of these commissions raise your salaries. I don't need a big paycheck. I'm doing fine. But at the same time, I know gas is going up. Everything's going up. As an elected official, I have to run for an office every 4 years. That's expensive. If you have someone run against you. Having just done that and won, I know it was very expensive. However, we're cognizant of your dollar, your hard-earned dollar out there. I don't expect if a salary commission came and said, oh, you're way below, I would have to disagree with that. I don't see a great need for raises. Just in comparison, my counterpart over in Benton County makes about $10,000 to $12,000 more a year than I do. I see myself doing about the same work that he does. He has other employees. I don't. You guys saw that earlier tonight. So I'm in favor of that commission. I would want it to be a commission that looks at the duties and responsibilities of each office too, and what's required. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, seeing no more comments, the public hearing is now closed. With that, we'll move on to public comment.
Do you want to take action on the ordinance?
Are we going to take action on this? Do I hear a motion?
Mr. Chairman, move for approval of ordinance 04-2021 as presented.
Second it.
There's a motion and a second. Discussion.
Just want to be on the record that the motion for approval is consistent with Ms. Nade's observation that the mechanics of some of the processes that she's described on the record and have been recorded are just part of the package, because there is a little administrative process in there that needs to be refined. But I think it's sufficient for us to pass now. Thanks.
Hearing no other discussion, all in favor say aye.
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 Aye. All right. With that, we'll move on to public comment. Okay, we have a list here. So first is Ms. Hatch.
So, answer my question. Is there a possibility that private insurance companies that are needing that information, or families that are needing that lab information, that they could pay for the test to a private lab to expedite that, or?
This is a comment. Can I make a comment back or
Yeah.
respond to it?
Yeah,
That's a possibility. In my office, I probably wouldn't allow that because the haves and have-nots would come in and be able to pay for it. The others that wouldn't be able to pay for that wouldn't be able to, and that wouldn't be fair. We need parity in the office. So I would probably say no. It would get very, bookkeeping would be very difficult because they build the office itself independently. If I pay that out, when the family or whoever would pay that back, that goes right back into the general fund. I would see it back in my budget.
And then how many times do you send something to the lab on average yearly?
On average, last year I did 52, but over the average, we're averaging about 40 a year.
Okay. Good to know. Okay. So with that, I also wanted to speak about the redistricting commission. In February 2020, without any forewarning or even members of the Hispanic community speaking about redistricting at Franklin County Commissioner meetings, all of a sudden, they came forward and said that they wanted a particular map chosen, and if they didn't get it, they would file a lawsuit. It was if someone had gone to them and stirred their hearts to anger. Why? We did not ever have any of them come and ask if they could be part of a redistricting commission or when one would be forming so that they can make sure that they were represented. Nope, it was, this is the map we want and we want it now or we will sue. It reminded me of how Commissioner Peck used the threat of a lawsuit to manipulate the county into buying back land sold to his good friend, Mr. Musser. Mr. Musser bid for it and even declared himself the winner of it, as he was also the auctioneer. Yet a few years later, out of the blue, he decided it was landlocked, and instead of working out a deal with the county to make it more accessible, he was going to sue and sue now. Our level-headed auditor, Mr. Beaton, recommended, therefore, that before we force the residents of Franklin County to buy this land back at the demanded price, that they needed to first have the land evaluated on its worth. But no, it had to be right then. So one of the other commissioners, that is no longer in office, capitulated to the pressures, and Commissioner Peck did not recuse himself as he had promised, and they ended up voting to have the county buy that back. That, to me, I'm not saying it's corrupt, but it has the appearance of corruption, and that is bad governance. We understand from several witnesses that Commissioner Peck had been carrying around since at least 2018 these 3 proposed redistricting maps. Commissioner Peck seems to be the only person that knows who drew up these 3 maps, and he has never told us. We still do not know who drew up these 3 maps. This is bad government. This is the epitome of appearance of corruption. I am hoping that we will finally know who drew up the 3 maps. However, the commissioners need to know that if any of these 3 maps are chosen, there will be a battle in the courts because they were drawn behind closed doors by who knows who, with what data, and without a redistricting commission made up of people from the community, including members of the protected classes, women, Hispanic, and Black Americans. Process matters, and it cannot be people running for commission within the next 4 years or people helping with the commissioner's campaign, and it cannot involve anyone from the commissioner's office. I understand that Commissioner Didier has put forth different people that work for the county on it. That's great, but I really, really implore you to at least have one Hispanic member at large from the community, from each of the commissioners' present districts, to be on it. They are a part of what makes Franklin County so amazing. Some of Commissioner's grandchildren, some of Commissioner Didier's grandchildren are Mexican, and I know that he understands the importance of this. The Hispanic peoples of Franklin County are the fabric of Franklin County, and when woven together as a community is why I love this county so much. I shop at the Hispanic downtown Pasco stores, save this last year with COVID. I served as the Relief Society president for the Spanish-speaking branch of our church when I was first married. My husband served a mission in Peru, and one of my sons-in-law served in Mexico. In fact, he and my daughter vacation there regularly. One of my sons-in-law's mother is from the Dominican Republic. We love the Hispanic and Latin peoples. Their values are our values: freedom, family, hard work, and self-determination. They are dignified people that don't take handouts. They have amazing integrity. I have 2 sisters that are African American, several nieces and nephews, brothers-in-law. They all are a part of who I am. I would never want anything less than our county being one community and celebrating what is important to all of us. You are Americans, and your voice is more important than being handed a map and told this is what's best for you. You need to be a huge part of drawing up these maps, not the commissioners or anyone tied to them in any way.
Ms. Hatch?
Am I out of time?
Well, we had a 3-minute and we talked about extending it to 4, but you are.
Okay, I'm
at
over.
4.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Was not probably included in my questioning.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, I will
Thank you.
finish reading it
Okay,
at the next.
thank you. Steve Simmons.
My comments are going to be really quick. One thing I've been following is the proposal to put in windmills on the Horse Heaven Wind Farm from the base of Jump Off Joe over to Benton City. And I've attended some of the hearings. And one of the things I wanted to do real quick was just to encourage our county and the commissioners to join with Benton County and their planning commission, their commissioners who have come out against this wind farm. And there's various reasons why that is, and I won't get into them too much tonight, other than the fact that there's concerns about the growth area, the concerns about the size of these things. There, one gentleman in one of the hearings that was last week on Tuesday brought up a really good point, and that is that they're pretty much, he compared them to the Space Needle, is what about how tall they are. They're anywhere from 500 to 600 feet. And it's in kind of an area where I know that the cities will be expanding. So I didn't know if the county had been involved in that at all. And I was just going to encourage you guys to participate in that if you could. I strongly encourage you to be against it due to the fact there's just a lot of concerns there. And I feel that some of those concerns are the fact that for instance, they talk about jobs, the jobs it's going to create. As a construction electrician myself, I know those jobs are very quick, rapid. They come and they go. And then they say the maintenance of them will bring long-term positions into this area. And I disagree. Most of those people are done by outside contractors who hire their own people, bring them in to maintain them. I know that we have and what concerns me about him also is the fact that we have a executive department in the state that seems to be pushing this. And so that concerns me as well, that the interests of our area are not being taken into consideration right now. Some of the other things that were brought up too were like and one of my concerns I have is that the focus on the climate, that is a reason why we should have these things. And one of my issues with that is we have a very energy diverse area here. We have nuclear power, we have hydropower, a lot of those, and we even had coal power at one point down in Oregon until they closed two of the plants there. And what bugs me about that is there's, I think we can have a more balanced approach to how we handle our energy needs in the future, especially dealing with climate issues. I think we need to acknowledge some certain things, that we have an abundance of certain fuels right now, and we can develop good ways in which we can use more renewable sources, but we need to be reasonable in how we do that with what we have right now. And closing those two plants down in Oregon really kind of agitate me, because if I look at what windmills provide and what dams provide and what hydropower provides, nuclear power provides, you get something from it. You get recreation, flood control, irrigation. You get long-term jobs. And I just don't see that with windmills. I'm not saying they're not effective and we can't use them, but there's a lot of concerns with the recycling and all that of them as well. So I just wanted to encourage Franklin County to be involved in that. And if they haven't already, and I don't know what has been done or what hasn't, just to get with them. And
I'll just leave you with this, that we have sent a letter.
Okay.
And we were waiting for Benton County's lead, because this is in their area.
Okay.
And we have a letter already drafted and signed by two of the commissioners.
Awesome.
So.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I know
Actually
Dan
been
Newhouse.
sent.
And it's
Yeah,
sent.
it's already been sent. Yeah, we're
Okay.
on record of being opposed.
That's
So
great.
thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
All right, next we have Kevin Heinen. Is Kevin here? Okay, we'll wait for Kevin. John Logue. If Kevin comes down, we'll get Kevin to the mic.
I thought I was signing up to comment on the salary commission, but after seeing your presentation and your heartfelt discussion about suicide, I just want to say thank you. You know, I could tell that is a topic that sincerely touched you. And, you know, I know coroner isn't one of the huge races every election cycle. And I just want to say thank you.
All right. Richard Dorman.
I wanted to thank the commission for putting this on YouTube and stuff. This has been very, very educational. A couple of weeks ago, my wife called me on my cell phone and says, "You better get the heck home here. Here's a picture of our dryland farm there at Usamisa next to the dairy, and they're talking about expanding the dairy immensely. I said, what? And I had never got a notification about the expansion or anything. And so I did more research into it and talked to my other neighbors, and I was kind of bummed out about it because I'm kind of against it. Even though Case is a good neighbor and everything, I like him a lot. I just think that that expansion is not going to be good for our neighborhood over there. And a bunch of my other friends, Brian Cordes there, he was telling me about it, and so I really appreciate that. And my main reason for, one of my main big reasons is I've been trying to get a well permit on this dryland farm, and the Department of Ecology has told me for 25 years, eventually I'll get one. And yet I take my airplane, I fly over Case's place, and he's putting up circles left and right. And years ago, the great late Steve Haley, who made the livestock exemption, put that through the state legislature, he told me that it was abuse. This was not what the cattlemen that pushed us through the state legislature envisioned. And he was very angry about that. And he was very angry about the Easter Day exemption also, just because that made things look bad. You know, that's not what the original exemption was for, not for big, huge mega dairies. And for my flying career, I used to fly into Fresno and the San Joaquin Valley. It used to irritate me to be able to fly over that, and see the immense dairies down there. And that's where Case came from. Sort of heavy smell, and it hung in the valley just like in Yakima Valley. And right now, I smell his stuff on the freeway and everything, and to increase his herd, double it, triple it, is just too much anymore. And so I feel like I was hoping the commission would really evaluate that. I understand it's a big economic boom for some of our farmers, you know, to have that, but yet there's a certain line where you begin to cross it in my mind. So anyway, I appreciate what you guys do. It's been very educational for me and my wife to watch this and watch what each one of you guys do. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for that feedback. Next, we have a signature, but there's a question mark, and I don't know whose it is, but there's a signature on here. Does anybody claim the signature? Because I can't tell.
I put my signature after my name.
Oh, did you, John? Well, that's what it is then. Okay. Okay, Michelle, you're next. And I don't believe Kevin, I think he probably left.
I think he's going to try to call in.
Oh, is he?
He left
Okay.
from upstairs.
Okay.
Yeah. On the salary, you all signed in this term, right? Are you contributing part of your salary back?
No,
Okay. It's something that you had talked about previous to coming
I
in.
talked about reducing our salaries.
No?
Yes.
I recall you saying you're
Okay.
going to.
Difference of
Heard that-
opinion, but this is
no,
public
I-
comment. You go ahead. You got your
I'm
public.
going to state that I heard that you were going to turn your salary in for that. The other thing is Rick Miller did not come to a meeting that required all three of the commissioners for that redistricting. They all have to sign off on it. So I'm a little confused as to where this secret stuff is coming from. I'm a little concerned at the tone of that. I have asked, and I'm hoping that the three of you are working very hard for this county, not anything else. And I came in about a week ago very frustrated about that. It's got to get better. It has to get better. The accusational tone that continues has got to stop. There's been too many wounds to this community, and I don't care what letter's behind your name. It is too much. It has to get better. And I had the same question, Mr. Curtis, about whether the families could pay or not. Perhaps we could create a fund to even out the have and have-nots, but we were talking about that upstairs too. So we have to get better. And I'm going to keep pushing that meeting after meeting until it's done.
Okay, so is there anybody on the phone?
I have two callers on the phone.
Okay. That's okay. We'll take the callers, sir, and then we'll have you come up.
Justin?
Yes, sir.
All right, Justin, you have the floor for your public comment, please.
Thank you, sir. I want to thank commissioners and county for the opportunity to speak in unregistered open comments. And that unlike other governing bodies in this town, you've never stopped open public comment. In fact, your guys are eager to hear it every time they come on. So I appreciate that. Today, first, to make you aware and all listening aware that since 2009, more than 1,400 unborn babies from Franklin County have been aborted. That's enough to fill 3 elementary schools, and that Planned Parenthood operates openly on Court Street, and it's reasonable to assume that most of those 1,400 were referred from the past. Good. And though it's in city limits, your in can be used to stop, to see an end to Planned Parenthood in Franklin County, as I'm certain that all 3 of you and Sheriff Raymond are pro-life. The first point necessitates the second, and that is to encourage you to look at ways to end all dependence on federal money in this county, especially as H.R. 1, H.R. 5, and H.R. 127 are passed federally. You have a moral obligation and have sworn an oath to uphold the Constitution, regardless of what happens in D.C. And I ask you to consider this in closing. How many of your decisions are made based on the Constitution? How many are based on the fear of a lawsuit? Or how many are based on losing federal money? They should all be based solely on the Constitution. Do what's right, come what may, gentlemen. Thank you. I appreciate your time.
Good evening, is this Scott?
It is.
Hi, Scott, you have the floor for your public comment.
Okay. I'd like to request that the county take a look at doing some dust control or paving Green R Road. We're getting a significant amount of dust across from the road across the corrals there where I feed my calf crop. And it's causing some health issues for the cattle. It also coats all of my trucks and equipment that are parked on the corner with dust. And I know it's also an issue for my neighbor to the south, Dan Martinez, who raises grapes. So we just like to request that the county take a look at maybe trying to do something there to help with the dust.
Okay, thank you. We'll do that.
Thank you.
I have one more caller.
Okay.
It's Kevin. Good evening, is this Kevin?
Yes,
Hi, Kevin, you have the floor for your public comment.
you betcha. I hope my phone doesn't die. Yes, I'd like to just fill in Rick Dorman on the dairy issue. Rick lives about 10 miles from the dairy, and so he isn't really exposed other than a property owner. And I've known Rick forever too, and I know both of them, Case and Rick, good people. I got to kind of stick up for the dairy. Case does a lot for the community. In years past, he's went down for a month, reduces the milk price at the Mesa grocery store, and just various other things. And I think we really need to look at that. He's wanting to increase that dairy. It's 2 miles out of Mesa to the east of town, which is downwind most of the time. We get very few north winds. It only impacts very few people every once in a while. It does. We get the smell once in a while, but very seldom. And we have to get milk somewhere. Cheese, milk, everything. So I think we should support it, and it's a huge tax revenue for Franklin County. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. One more caller.
Okay, we got this gentleman.
Thank you, Commissioners. It's my pleasure to be here. I'm Daniel Martinez, and I'm representing Firewater Ranch, which owns the property south of Hot Englishes, and we have the vineyard there. And it's 153 Greener Road in Mesa. And we're concerned about the vineyard's considered a food grade product, and the dust, and considered about food safety, and the dust and the dust mites generated off the dust of Greener Road. Thank you.
Thank you. I do believe we have, Matt, you're on the phone, correct? Matt is?
No, he's not on the phone.
Craig's on the phone? And Craig got the road on that, so he can take look into that? Okay, fantastic. All righty. Is there nobody else on the phone? Any more public comment?
Couple of comments I'd like to share with you. One is for you, Mr. McCary. Mr. McGarry, excuse me. My family's had the unfortunate opportunity to work with him, and I wanted to tell you that I'm very thankful for the way my family was treated. I lost an older sister to a terrible disease, Lou Gehrig's, and working with his office was certainly went very well, and I'm thankful for that. And the way that you treated our family, that's very much appreciated, and I appreciate your heart in caring for the our neighbors and friends. It's a part of life. It's a part of what we have to face and have to deal with, and I appreciate you doing it with dignity. That's highly appreciated as a part of the community. On the salary commission, this something that came to me I meant to say, and I kind of forgot it. Somebody that we all, I believe, respect much is the Gipper. He said, "Trust but verify," and I think that's simply what we're doing with the salary commission. I don't think that we're necessarily saying that what you're being paid is right. I don't think we're saying it's wrong. I think we're saying that we should verify it, and this is a process that is in place that we can do that. And I think that that's a way that we can verify and at least have something that we can all hopefully come to an agreement on. As far as Case Vandermeulen, I've had the opportunity to know Case for a number of years, and I grew up just down the road from Mr. Dorman, and appreciate both men and what they brought to the community. As a pilot as well, I've flown over Case's property many times, and I have a lot of people in my family that are in the dairy industry in the Midwest and towards the East Coast, and from the time I was knee high to now, I've been around dairies, and of all of the dairies, I admire Case. I've told him this on many occasions when I've had the opportunity, is Case runs a first-rate, first-class, clean, organized operation. And if you're going to have a mega dairy, it should be one like Case's. It's clean. He works diligently as a cattleman myself. Disease control and cleanliness is one of the most important things you can have in raising livestock, and Case does a first-rate job of that. I've gone to him for advice, asking him his theory on how to do things as far as that, and I think he does a first-rate job. And of all the places to do that, downwind from our population centers and on ground that is not prime, right? He's on the Rocky Bluffs and the less desirable farm ground of our area, and I think he's doing a fantastic job, and I think he should be wholeheartedly supported in his attempt to expand and grow and serve our community better. So thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment? Seeing none, I believe it's time for the vouchers.
Move for approval of fund expenditures in the total amount of $239,810.17 as presented, and note that it has been reviewed and signed by 2 representatives of the auditor's office and the county administrator.
Second.
Been a motion and a second. Discussion. Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Motion for approval of salary clearing payroll and emergency management payroll in the total amount of $973,202.03 as presented, and note that it has been reviewed and signed by 2 representatives of the auditor's office.
Second.
Been a motion and a second. Discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. All right. Move on down to the consent agenda. I believe we have 4 items on the consent agenda.
Move for approval of consent agendas 1 through 4.
Second.
Been a motion and a second. Discussion? I'd like to ask on item 3, consent agenda. This item is the mutual use of jail facilities with Benton County to avoid Resolution 2021-063. And here in the background, it says that we're going to approve this agreement through April 30th of 2022. My question is, with everything on the rise, with inflation setting in, I think we might be doing ourselves a disservice to stretch that out that long because of the costs of everything that's going up. I think we would be better served if we're going to be, because we're going to get $102.92 a day. Everything's going up, food, medical supplies, and I don't know if that's going to be even electricity. So how do we equate the $102.92 per prisoner?
Yes, if I may, Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
the jail officers here at the Franklin County Jail, and of course the Benton County Jail, kind of negotiate this rate as a fair and equitable determination. I can't say for sure that the cost won't go up between now and that period of time, but this was a recognition of what they thought was a fair representation of the cost of housing inmates in one another's facilities when we're not exchanging inmates.
Okay, so it's basically, it takes us out to April, so it's a 1-year agreement.
Yes. Yeah, just about a year, a little over a year.
So that's probably the minimal that we can do.
That would be my recommendation. A 1-year agreement, it takes, as you know, an inordinate amount of time to negotiate these interagency agreements.
Okay.
So my recommendation would be to stick with that 1 year. I think that's a reasonable time frame.
All right, that was my only question. Any other discussion? Been a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Okay, that moves us on down to administration office business.
Yeah, the only thing I have was a question. I apologize that Mr. Mahoney couldn't be here tonight. He's had a family matter come up, but question he asked me about a request possibly from Representative Newhouse to outline some potential projects in Franklin County that may be under the consideration of some of these federal funds that we talked about earlier. And I don't think I was copied on the email, so I probably just need some direction. I think the commissioners were included on the information. I just want to know if you need my support or staff support to address that issue of.
Well, I think that we really need to be looking at the infrastructure, especially over there by Road 168. And I got an email here from the Shumway family. As owners of the Shumway Farms LLC and Shumway Family Properties LLC, we'd like to meet with you at your earliest convenience to discuss the possibilities of a roundabout being installed at the intersection of our property on Columbia River Road, Taylor Flats Road, 68 Clark Road, and Dent Road. With the amount of traffic using this intersection daily to access Road 100 and 182, we think the flow of traffic could be regulated with a smoother transition and fewer accidents with the addition of a roundabout. We would like to and be willing to grant an easement on part of our ground to facilitate this. And I think that we really need to be looking, if there's any funds available, that we need to be looking at a bypass highway, because those semis that do take that road, they actually have to stop traffic and back up to make that corner because it's more than a 90. It's dangerous. And that's why we're seeing all the traffic on Glade Road. I mean, it is intense on Glade Road. So I would really like to see us try to utilize, if there's some funds available, to try to get in front of this before that building starts out there with the talk of Costco showing up. We're gonna be way behind the ball on this one. And I remember when I played for the Skins, being back there in Virginia, when it grew that fast, and it was all right-hand turns, 5 minutes to get to Redskins Park. Took me over 2 hours to get home, all left-hand turns. I don't want that for the residents of Franklin County. I want to get in front of this. So if there's any funds available, I would say yes. Let's get Matt Mahoney to direct those in that area.
So, Mr. Chairman, several comments. First off, I recall in previous meetings you talking about having approached the Shumways, or they approached you. In either case, you had a discussion about their willingness to provide lands for an easement or a bypass in that area. So clearly it's not a new topic to you, and I recall the previous discussion, so it's not entirely new to me either. And like you, I got a call a few days ago from Congressman Newhouse about these federal funds. The difficulty I'm having with looking at a roundabout or a bypass or something with these funds is that Congress wants answers as to specific outlines and projects by May 7th, which is just weeks away. And having a bit of experience in that arena, us going in and asking for money for a project that hasn't even been publicly discussed, hasn't been designed, right-of-ways haven't been secured, something that's normally a year or two long process, I fear that we would immediately go to the bottom of the list among counties in the 4th Congressional District for funds. Alternatively, we've got projects that are in our 6-year transportation improvement program that are already in various stages of design and approval and would be well received. One that comes to mind for me is improving our all-weather road structure so that our ag producers have reliable year-round roads to get product to market. There are some fairly large industries that are looking at Franklin County for future business participation, development, processing plants, hundreds of employees. Some of those rely very heavily on assurances of having all-weather roads to support ag. So I won't take away from the idea that the intersection at Dent and Columbia River Road, and Taylor Flats and Clark is in some respects a nightmare, and it does need some attention. I just don't think we have the luxury of looking at it for this particular opportunity. And I noted in the letter from Shumways, I got the same one, that they're talking about how it would serve to drive traffic to Road 100. And I'm wondering, Road 100 being 2 lanes, at least presently, and driving more traffic through an area where we're about to build a Costco and several other things. I don't know that we've got the forward-looking planning yet on what the Road 100 corridor looks like to say that we want to necessarily build something that drives even more traffic that direction. Again, not saying it's a bad idea. I think it's worth discussing. But with respect to what Mr. Johnson brought up and the fact that the Congress is looking for someone to be appointed to represent Franklin County as early as this week, and to meet with other counties over the next couple of weeks, and then to produce a list of potential projects from the 4th Congressional District for the congressman to present to the Congress on May 7th, 3 weeks from now. We really have to, I think it's very clear, have to go to the shelf and look at what projects we've already prioritized and which are already in various states of what the government likes to call shovel ready. I'm still trying to figure out what they really mean by that, because they hardly ever are. They're always in various states of readiness. So that's my take on it. And lastly, I would say certainly our public works folks need to be involved in anything like this, but I think it would be poor form and bad practice to try and position one of our employees in the unenviable political mess of sitting down with county commissioners from all the other counties in the 4th district and expect them to try and figure out what this board wants and then go try and win that battle for those funds. I think we do our county the best service by taking good projects that are already in various states of design and can be presented with a full picture and would compete very well with other counties. So that's my take on this very, very short notice opportunity.
Yes, and I called Matt Mahoney, talked to Matt Mahoney, and this project is already on our 6-year plan. So it is there. It is one of the projects, and this is one that we really need to focus on because it is one of the avenues for the farmers. Road 68 is not an all-weather road. Leads right into that. And yes, Road 100 would have to be more lanes, as would Dent Road. All of it would have to be expanded, and it has to be done now before the building gets going. If the building gets going, it is going to be a mess.
Well, it appears we have a little bit of a disconnect because Mr. Mahoney called me and said that you had asked him to call me, and my first question is it on the tip? And he said no. So that'll be the first question for us to figure out.
I guess we better ask Mr. Mahoney then, because he told me that he was.
There may be parts of it, making portions of Road 68 all-weather or portions of Taylor Flats, but when you're talking about re-engineering and redesigning an entire intersection like that, I don't recall that being on our tip, but I could be wrong.
Okay.
But with
You got
respect
anything to add
to
to that,
Mr. Johnson's question, he's looking for guidance and direction.
Is that your direction then, is to have Mr. Mahoney represent this board on?
That's mine, but I'm just one commissioner, so I think it needs to be the consensus of the commissioners.
I think that puts Mr. Mahoney in an untenable situation. He's got 3 commissioners. We've got differing views on what the project ought to be.
He's the one that's got the 6-year plan in front of him, and he knows the roads, and you and I both can't agree on what's on the plan right now. He knows what's on the plan, and he knows what's shovel ready, so I think he'd be the perfect candidate for it.
So I would take that then that you're saying that if it's on the 6-year plan, he's got a green light from you to move forward with that as a recommendation? Anything that's on the 6-year plan?
That is in that corridor over there, yes.
No.
Which is an all-weather road, 68. I'm all for it.
If we've got an all-weather road project, I take that to be very different than re-engineering that intersection. But if we've got a plan that's on the books for all-weather road improvements to Taylor Flats and 68, I can agree on that.
There you go.
I just want to be clear, that intersection update, I don't see that as part of that project, but maybe it is. We'll take a look and find out.
So at this point, then maybe we don't take any action until we can meet with Mr. Mahoney. But that's cutting down the May 7th deadline, which we still have all of April.
Conversation tomorrow.
Huh?
I'll have that conversation with him tomorrow.
There you go. So next meeting, we can have it on the agenda.
Sure.
Okay. All righty, with that, is there any other administration office business? We're to public comment, the second public comment. Is there anybody that would like to?
Thank you for letting me finish. This is really important because we know that we have been told that if we do not vote on the plan that is wanted by a group in Franklin County, that there's going to be a lawsuit filed against Franklin County. So I believe that a redistricting commission should be one of our top priorities. There are many laws governing redistricting. We do know that redistricting by any government is not allowed in an election year after January 16th, which is important because it was brought to us in February of last year, which was an election year. We do know that the state does not even redraw boundaries until the census data has been made public. And why is this important? One of our counties could be a our counties can be realigned after census comes out, as well as our legislative districts. Second, to redraw boundaries while the date is just a few months away can also lead to a lawsuit. The law states that we cannot redraw boundaries once they are redrawn for another 4 years unless it's taken to court. What if the boundary that's been redrawn after the census comes out, we see that one street that is inhabited by a protected class, now their vote has been watered down? That would actually have to go to the courts to decide that. I think it's important that, and another thing is that the laws for district boundaries are pretty strict. There can be no islands, but a continuous body. They also have to be equal in population. And I know that there are census estimates out there, but due to our area growing faster than any others, we would be doing the citizens of Franklin County by deciding on boundaries without complete data would be a great disservice, as well as to the Hispanic community here. The other point that I want to bring up is that because these 3 maps are in question as to their origin, I again call for a redistricting commission to come up with maps, to completely put those aside. And then the commissioners, of course, will vote on what the redistricting commission recommends. Keep in mind, if this does go to court, we would have to learn of who drew up these 3 maps. And the only way to do that would be, first, our prosecuting attorney's office would have to recuse, because we don't know if they were a part of that or if they were witnesses to that. But that every person in this county would be questioned as to who drew those up, and they would have to testify. This would be a great conflict. All I ask is that the members of the Hispanic community come together with our Franklin County commissioners and help form a redistricting commission, one that gives them a voice. I appreciate everything that the recommendations that Commissioner Didier gave, because he looked at how the state redistricts for their legislative bodies and legislative districts. And so I think that's important to look at, but at the same time, because we want to show a good faith effort to our Hispanic citizens, that they need to have a voice on drawing the maps to begin with. 3 weeks ago, because we have heard from Commissioner Peck this last year that no other counties in this state ever use a redistricting commission, but we had the Columbia County Commissioner here, and he stated that their county does, and he didn't know of any other county that did not use a redistricting commission. And then we learned that it was Keith Johnson, evidently, that is the one that's been telling us that. However, I again implore commissioners to vote on the perimeters of who could be on the redistricting commission. You have a couple of weeks left. So those people have time to meet with members of the community, study up on the laws, and be ready as soon as the census data is released. Good governance is never done by a threat of a lawsuit, and it will only hurt the Hispanic community as well as all of Franklin County. And I know that none of us would want that. Their voice is important, and they deserve to be heard. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment? Anybody on the phone, Keith?
No, sir.
Okay, with that, is there any other business for the good of the board?
I have a motion I'd like to make. I move that we terminate the employment contract with the county administrator, Keith Johnson, effectively immediately.
I'll second that motion with discussion.
I made my remarks about county administrator the last time that this motion was brought forward. And I will tell you, we've got well, I won't even tell you my personal opinion on it. I'll just say that I've worked with every other county in the state through WASAC, through the Legislative Steering Committee, through working in Olympia. You let Mr. Johnson go. Good luck finding someone as competent and capable and credentialed. And the proof will be in the pudding. If you do this, you'll be right out there in front of the citizens and you can demonstrate how many great people there are out there that can replace this gentleman. I went through the process. We advertised, we used professionals that searched all over the country, and they brought us the best that they could find. It's a little bit like county engineers. Good ones are hard to come by, and you should be exceedingly cautious in letting a good one go. And I think you'd be making a tremendous mistake, and I think a grave disservice to the people of Franklin County. But because this has come up twice now, it appears that you're bent on doing that. So I'll close by saying, couldn't disagree more. And as a guy who's got more than twice as much experience in this arena as you two combined, I think you ought to consider that.
There should be more public comment on that.
Excuse me, there is a motion and a second. There's discussion by the commissioners, and that is it.
Don't impress me at all.
Mr. Mullen.
I believe it's in the county's best interest that we move forward with it.
Could I get the benefit of an explanation?
Yes.
Keith, please. Speak freely.
It's appalling to me that no one from this board discussed this with me beforehand. And I have been given no evaluation or review or opportunity to defend decisions. And I, at a minimum, for the 5 years that I've contributed to this county, feel like I'm owed an explanation.
So the taxpayers.
Excuse me?
No.
Please leave the room.
No. No.
Who do you think you are?
I'm a taxpayer.
Okay. Please sit and remain silent.
I'm going to stand up. I'm not going to sit for this.
Well, Keith, I had a meeting with you after the first motion, and I told you that we had a management problem in this courthouse. We have departments that are not functioning very well, and I have constituents that are very angry with me. And the management of this courthouse has got us into some jeopardy right now. And that's all I'm going to say.
Commissioner Mullen, you made the motion. You're not obliged to answer any of my questions, but I'd sure be grateful in a professional context if you could give me some insight as to why you think we need to replace Mr. Johnson.
I feel that things are happening in the county that are not being shared with, at least not being shared with me. And that concerns me. I would think that as a commissioner, I should have full knowledge of what is transpiring within the county. I've been here over 3 months and I've had no direction whatsoever as far as what is taking place in the county. And that concerns me. Is I don't know if you're working with the other 3 commissioners, or I'm sorry, the other 2, but I guess I feel I'm being left in the dark because there's never any discussion about current events or what's going on.
I have probably 50 open major projects for the county at any one time. And I would disagree that you have been left in the dark. You have had now 2 presentations. I don't mean to call into question anything that's been presented by these elected officials, department heads. You were the one that requested those. And you've asked no questions of those folks coming to take their time to make a presentation to the public.
Yeah, I asked
Is it
them.
my job to educate you on how to be a commissioner?
No,
Do
but
you
I would
see that?
surely want someone that's going to try to help me succeed.
Which is, from my position, that's all I've done. You've cut me off. You wouldn't let me have the resources I have or that I need and requested that we approved in the budget. You called those into question and stopped me from having the staff ability to do that. And now you're turning around and blaming me for a lack of management in the courthouse. You're free to make the decision, but I don't think you're doing it in fairness. I have not, since I've been here in 5 years, have not had a performance review from the commissioners.
You've had one.
No, when?
By the commissioners?
Yeah.
Last year. I requested it. We did it.
No, you didn't.
On you.
I never saw it. It was never shared with me if you did that.
You sat in here when we reviewed it.
I don't believe so.
And I asked you the other day, how many performance reviews have you done on the head of the departments? And you said you don't do performance reviews.
We have not. It's not been a practice in the courthouse, including me. But I don't have a problem with my department heads. If I have a problem with them, I go to them, we discuss it and fix it. I'd be curious to know how many of my department heads you've asked about this. How many of the other elected officials have you talked to? The people that I work with every day. I talk to people in the community, cities that all over the Tri-Cities, their leadership. Ask them how they think I'm doing. You guys aren't here often enough to know what's going on in the courthouse. That's not a criticism. I know you're busy professionals. You've got things to do, and your job's not to sit at a desk in the courthouse. But I don't know how you can make an astute observation of the challenges in the courthouse by being here a few hours a week without talking to somebody besides constituents who are mad at the planning department. I hear those same complaints. They're understaffed. They're under siege because we're the fastest growing county out there, but we can't recruit and retain qualified planners. The best planners that we had left and went to work for Benton County. There's a reason for that. They don't feel like Franklin County is a good place to work.
And why do they feel that way?
Because they don't get the support from this board. When we ask for help, we don't get it. When you talk to our legislative representatives, you want to talk about the Second Amendment. I'm a great believer in the Second Amendment, but the county commissioners have no material role in Franklin County's involvement in the Second Amendment. We've had the biggest fraud in Franklin County take place in the last 6 weeks that we've learned about. We haven't talked about that once, and the impact on the local farming and ag community. That issue alone is going to have a bigger impact on the economy of Franklin County than all of COVID has for the last year. So if it makes you feel better to blame me for that, knock yourselves out.
I'm not blaming you. I just feel like I never see you here. So how?
No, you're blaming him. You're blaming him. I can't imagine somebody, frankly, firing a subordinate because the subordinate didn't teach him how to do his job. This is recorded. It's your own words.
Subordinate or CEO of Franklin County?
This gentleman's position is subordinate to this Board of Commissioners.
And he is the CEO of Franklin County. He is the guy that runs the show.
I have no authority but what this board grants me. And you're, I will let my 30-plus years in public sector service speak for itself.
You've got
I
a
don't need
guy.
to sit and defend myself
No,
for this.
you don't. You got a guy who's got a sterling reputation with every single executive I know of in the Tri-Cities. If you haven't talked to them, if you haven't talked to all the electeds in the courthouse, to take an action like this is just, it's beyond the pale. I mean, the guy was a comptroller for the state of Idaho, a state level elected position. Which one of us has been privileged and trusted by an entire state to serve in that capacity? He's a CPA. He's got a law degree. I mean, I'm sorry, if I'd known that you needed more help learning how to be a commissioner, I would have come to you before
It's
you
not
got
that I need
signed
more
in.
help. I just want to know what's going on.
I would have come to you before you got sworn in and offered to help, except that, I did that over and over,
And I don't
4
think-
times.
And I don't think that's a good avenue to go to.
You got one of the most experienced commissioners in the state offering to coach you.
And that's why we're not allowed to talk to each other.
That was before your term started. And I told you, let me help you before you get sworn in, because then it's not legal for us to talk. So you've had offers, you've had expertise provided to you. You just rebuffed it because I don't know why.
Why? Because we're not supposed to talk to each other. And just because it's a few days,
It was a month.
okay, a month. I still, in my
Every
book,
other
doesn't
commissioner I know has taken advantage of meeting with his future commissioners while it was legal to do so to help get up to speed. The training that you did participate.
We have a
with,
motion on the floor
and we're in discussion and I have the floor.
for the discussion of our administrator.
And I'm talking about this gentleman's allegation against this gentleman who you want to
No,
terminate.
you're
It's
talking
relevant.
about coaching him up. You're not
It's
talking
relevant.
about the administrator.
Okay, so your concern with the administrator is that he didn't coach you to do the job, and I'm saying,
no, that's your words. My words
well,
are.
we'll let the public look because it's recorded.
Okay.
I'd be more than happy to sit down with you anytime and review those major projects that are ongoing.
Then we
Give you
need to
as
sit
much-
down and make a time too.
I'm happy to do that.
If nothing else, give the man the professional courtesy of not blindsiding him in an evening meeting on essentially public TV.
I don't think it's blindsided. I mean, I think this issue came up a month ago, but I still don't see any change.
Well, by your own admission, you don't know what's going on.
Is there any
I only
other?
know the information that's passed on to me.
I moved to table the
Could I ask
motion.
you who's passing on that information to you?
What information is that?
What you just referred to. You said you only know what the information that's passed on to you.
Yeah, which is basically none.
Oh, you're suggesting I need to provide you more information. Okay.
Well, I
That's
would
fair.
think that you would want to work with the commissioners to let them know
Absolutely,
exactly
I do.
what's going on.
Yeah, if you and I have a misunderstanding about what our roles are, then let's clear that up. That can be overcome. I'm more than happy to spend as much time as you would like, but I need the understanding and the support when you realize that there is a lot more going on than I have time for to pay that kind of detailed attention to. The CEO can't be signing warrants. You've tasked me without giving me the resources to do my job, if that's the criticism. But that's why I invite you to talk to the people that I work with, talk to my staff. I have nothing to hide. Talk to the other elected officials, the city councils, the county, or the city managers, the mayors, the people who make government what it is in Franklin County. I have an obligation to work for the taxpayers just like you do. Believe me, I understand that. But I, at a minimum, feel like I ought to be offered the opportunity to be fair about this, and I don't feel like this is fair.
We got a motion and a second.
No, Mr. Chairman, we have a motion to table that I've been waiting for you to acknowledge.
We got a motion to table. Is there a second?
I second it.
We have a motion and a second to table the motion. Discussion.
When do you have time to set up a time that you can meet with me? Because as a commissioner, I feel that I should know what's going on in the county, and but I'm not getting that information from you.
I do have some set meetings during the week, but I will move those around because this is a much bigger priority. So I will meet with you whenever it's convenient for you.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Got a motion and a second to table. Is there any more discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Nay. Motion carries. We table the motion. Next week. Seeing that there's no other business, is there any other business for the good of the county? Hearing none, the meeting is.
Chairman, before we close, I want to speak briefly, because the hour is late, to the comments by one of our citizens regarding redistricting. I will just say, for the benefit of the public who are watching this, the information presented in those public comments was wildly inaccurate, inconsistent with the advice and guidance of our attorney, who is a specialist in this field. And the persistent question about who drew the illustrious maps from years ago was answered in a previous meeting by Mr. Johnson, who said a number of staff people participated. The numbers, as I recall, and as I think he recalled, were assembled in the precincts by the auditor's office, the IT staff, drafted maps. There was input from multiple staff members. No one was excluded that wanted to participate. They were only ever drafts, and they were produced for the purpose, and I gave this speech over and over and over and over, that in 2018, the state legislature passed the Washington Voting Rights Act. And I made the point that Franklin County has been out of compliance with the revised Code of Washington state law and county districts, and that the new law, the Voting Rights Act, passed in February, I think, of 18, to be signed into law by the governor in July of 18, was going to further complicate redistricting. And I said over and over, if we don't fix our non-compliance with state law, it will get fixed for us. I don't know how long it will take. We will get sued. And, excuse me, I made multiple presentations to this board encouraging them to redistrict before someone did it for us and to us. And friends, that is exactly what has happened. We received a letter that is public record on October 12th of last fall. They gave us 180 days to fix this problem. That's 6 days from now. It still has not been addressed despite my urging to do it. Now, whether this gets negotiated or mitigated or there's a lawsuit, to be determined. But our districts are out of compliance because they don't meet the compactness standard. They're somewhere in the 14 to 18% out of balance, which is another requirement that they be divided, quote, as equally as possible, unquote. They don't use recognized boundaries or easily identifiable boundaries. And most importantly, the allegation will be, and is in the letter that was sent to us, that it disenfranchises recognized majority-minority populations. As a result, as we have seen with the city of Pasco, and I don't think I'm speaking out of turn here, you can expect that there will be a demand for elections for commissioners at district-only levels, and that these districts will largely be drawn for us. And if we don't wish to accept that, then the courts will participate. This is exactly what happened with Pasco. It's exactly what I predicted 3 years ago would happen, and 2 years ago, and 1 year ago, and 6 months ago. It is all recorded public meeting. So if you doubt any of these facts or want any history, it's all public record. You can just go listen for yourself. It's exactly how this went down. So this constant pandering to whatever political interest over redistricting is a complete farce. We are in a legal jam on our districts, and it will be fixed for us, not by us. And it's because we didn't deal with it.
Okay, are we done?
Thank you, Mr.
With
Chairman.
that-
I'm done.
We adjourn.